You just mentioned this too, like NDAs run out. A lot of people are kind of past the point of caring about this, but even as an experienced writer, is this a difficult one to write about? Because when you go to your sources, right, there's, documents and things that you can go to, but when you go to sources, a lot of people in this industry are going to want to put out what they think happened or whatever puts them in the best light. Did you find with a lot of your conversations, you're kind of sitting there going, I'm going to have to check this, I'm going to have to check this? Or were people generally pretty forthright with you about their experiences and what they think happened?
Well, I think people were forthright with me about their perspective on the experience. I'm sure some people lied to me also. People lie all the time. A lot of times I was dealing with stories where people had different versions of the story. And in that case, I would always try to get everyone's perspective. There's a level at which I can't legally, so I could figure out what seemed most right. But sometimes there's genuinely, different points of view. It's funny, Grant Loud in the book, he talked to me about how everyone refers to what happened with the Louds as a Rashomon story within the circle of those people. And he was like, it's fine. Like, I have one version of it. The Raymonds remember it differently. But then he made this other point where he said, at a certain point, I actually saw Rashomon and I realized that everybody thought that was about how everyone has their own version, but it's actually about how everyone's version is about them as the hero. And I do think that's true, is I would talk to people about some of these stories and people remember their own role differently than other people did. But there are also some things where it was just like, it's both frustrating and fun when there's a story that has multiple angles. And I did find there were like crazy things where you just need to hear everyone's point of view. Like there was this weird thing that happened in the first season of Survivor where Richard Hatch, who ultimately won the show, was in the final rounds of it, and they were all genuinely, legitimately, in a non-contrived way, starving, in a way that they often didn't on later seasons of Survivor, because as several people pointed out, it doesn't actually make great television for people not to be able to move and to be dehydrated and sleeping all the time because they're getting sick. But anyway, they were very hungry, and Richard accused Kelly, who ended up coming in second on the show, of having gotten like a power bar from one of the cameramen. So I really did my best to, I talked to Kelly, I talked to Richard, I talked to the cameraman. There were a couple of stories like that in the book. I would try my best to tell the story where I set out the multiple angles of it and then let the reader both make up their own mind and also just kind of understand the range of things. That was just one of them, though. There are a bunch of different things.
What I'm hearing, Emily, is that you probably have a bunch of notebooks with crazy-ass rumors that you can't put out because you get sued, but they'd probably be really interesting to read.
Honestly, I tried to include, I like a book to be interesting, and these are interesting stories. It's part of why I wanted to write about them. I tried to be respectful and sensible, and this is not a tabloid. I wouldn't say that, sometimes I know some things that happened on shows that I didn't put in the book, because at a certain point, it's not super relevant to what happened on the show. Because the bulk of what I wanted to portray in the book had to do with the creation of the reality genre and also with the experiences of the crew members and the cast members as they essentially invented jobs that had never existed before. But some of that was about the relationship between the two sides. So to the extent that I was writing about, colorful stories, a lot of them that I ended up focusing on were stories about those dynamics, which I think are key to understanding the genre, even its modern form. Because, on a scripted show, there's a writer and there are cast members and they read the lines and they're directed and it's produced and they're edited together. On a reality show, it depends on the show because obviously they have different formats, but the relationship between a field producer and a cast member is the material that the show creates. It's the behavior that results from that relationship that you see on the show. So in this book, I had the opportunity to describe the relationship, the sort of collaborative, sometimes abusive, sometimes generative and positive sort of improvisation that has to do with both sides of that. And then separately, what the editors do, which is its own thing.